So many people have been asking me questions such as, could I bring my car over to the Philippines? Could I get a container to put all my personal belongings and send them to the Philippines? Could I dismantle my motorcycle and assemble them back when I get to the Philippines? I don't know the purpose of all these questions. Are they a mechanic? Is this their hobby? I have no idea. So I'd like to take a look at this, but I'm not prepared at this time. But I want to share with you something that was shared with me by one of my viewers. Stay with me. We'll talk about it. Thank you very much for Joyce de Cruz, maybe that's De La Cruz, about sharing this information, which is to me very important. I believe in this, and that is the reason why when I moved to the Philippines, I did not bring anything, almost nothing with me. I brought little things that would fit in a balikbayan box, but nothing significant. No furnitures, no cars, no nothing. I sold everything I have, and I bought everything I need in the Philippines. Now, let's take a look at what he shared. This is an hour ago, but this was something that was sent to me or comment given to me, I would say about a week ago. So this is not very old, but it's also not very fresh. But I decided I will share this with you because this is very important. I just sent my 67 Porsche to the Philippines. It was loaded in a container in San Francisco sometime mid-April. It was loaded in mid-April, and then it was scheduled to arrive at the Port of Manila on May 9th. Then it became June 6th, then June 26th, and to date, it has not arrived yet. And the month of June has already ended. It's now July. Apparently, the ship first went to Long Beach, California, from San Francisco, then Ningbo, China, then is now scheduled to arrive on June 26 in Malaysia. That's in Malaysia, that's not the Philippines yet. It seems like the container was loaded on a cruise ship versus a container ship. Anyway, I was quoted by the BOC, that's Bureau of Customs. Based on the description I provided them earlier this year, that the tax would be around 380,000 pesos. So how much is that? About $8,000. $8,000 between $7,000 and $8,000. Okay. They explicitly indicated that this figure was only an estimate. Only an estimate. My broker quoted me a much higher figure, an amount quadruple to what I was quoted, 4 times, which obviously includes grease money for the customs officials. By the way, regarding this, every time I send out a balikbayan box, I can't remember how much my wife pays. I think she pays extra $5, and apparently that's for grease money to the customs people who may be investigating or inspecting what is in the box. They don't really open the box because it gets that sealed to my family in the Philippines. But there's always that grease money. So I won't be surprised if there will be grease money involved on this. Had I known that the figure was going to be that much, I would have just decided to keep my car in the US. Anyway, I'm still waiting for a notice from my broker if my car has finally arrived or not. What a headache. This is exactly what I'm saying, and I assume this is a common thing that happens in the Philippines. Just after my graduation, and I was working with my father's accountant regarding actual practice, he said to me, if your client tax liability, this is just an example, okay? If your client's tax liability is $100,000, that's real tax liability, you have to cheat. And maybe you should only declare 30,000 pesos in tax liability. Why is that? Because whether you're actually declaring the entire 100,000 or not, they are expecting to receive grease money. So let's say that you expect them to pay them, let's say 10,000. Let's say you decided, okay, well, if that's the case, I'll only pay 20, knowing that I will be asked another 10 or 20,000 grease money. So in effect, I'll wind up paying about 40, maybe even $50,000. So I still save myself 50,000 because my total liability, real, honest liability, would have been 100,000. And that's how it worked in the Philippines. Always, always. So it's unfortunate, but I also know that same thing is happening at the Bureau of Customs. And as a matter of fact, you had this corruption in the Philippines earlier. I don't know if it's still happening, about this laglag bala, where they plant something and then they don't really arrest you, but they threaten to arrest you, hoping that they will get money from you so that you can move on with your life. And I hope this thing stops. I hope this thing stops. But it's very hard to stop this thing because of the poor people in the Philippines and the low wages being paid them. And they can only rely on corruption such as this. This is the reason why I did not plan on sending my car to the Philippines. I'm leaving them here in the United States, and I will, if I do decide to buy a car in the Philippines, I will just buy it there. Then no headache, no headache. Car in the Philippines is expensive, I know that, but you may wind up paying more if you pay taxes and this so-called grease money. And by the way, Philippines themselves are discouraging people because why? They honestly admit that they wanted to get the revenue in the Philippines, because when you buy something in the Philippines, import duties are already paid for, so that's money for the Philippines. So if you bring your car, they'll make sure that they tack on the import money that they would have lost or earned by you buying a used car or a brand new car in the Philippines. Now, there was a time, I can't remember, several years ago, that I saw in the consulate office that they will not accept any car that is older than 5 years. I also heard that you cannot finance a car in the Philippines that is older than 5 years. And I don't know how true that is. For people who are viewing this vlog, I will appreciate it if you share your experience down below so we know more or less what is really happening. Have you brought any car, any automobile in the Philippines successfully with no problem or with problem? And have you brought something in that is already 8 to 10 years old? People's mentality is that, oh gee, I already have a 20-year-old car, so it's almost worthless or worth nothing. It's still worth something. The problem here is the valuation. Who's going to determine the valuation? What you think might be the value today, say maybe only $500 or $1,000. They might say, oh, this thing is worth $1 million in the Philippines. Who knows who's right? Black book, is it red book or blue book value? Is that what they use? And do they even use it? Hard to know. And for that reason, I would discourage people from bringing something into the Philippines. Just buy it new or used in the Philippines. Besides, let me show you something. This guy, and by the way, this is not to criticize the guy for wanting to send his Porsche to the Philippines, but the highest speed for a Porsche is about 214 miles per hour. Yet, the top speed limit in the Philippines is 60 kilometers or 37 miles per hour. And for expressway, it's 100 kilometers per hour or 62 miles per hour. So where are you going to drive that Porsche that can go up to 214, 250 miles per hour? It's just not practical. The only use I can see for it is, number one, I love my car, I'm married to my car, and therefore or not to bring the car to the Philippines. Even though they may not be planning to drive it at that top speed, because that top speed really is not even practical in the United States. So I have seen speed limits in the United States about 75 or 80 miles per hour as being the top speed. That is very practical, for example, in Germany. Well, there is no speed limit, and therefore you can drive that there. But this is either you just love it, or maybe you like to bring it in for show. But you know what? As a matter of fact, I was thinking of just buying a jeepney. You know, what do they call it? Owner type Jeep. And the reason is, when I was in the Philippines 50 years ago, I grew up with a jeepney. We never had a car. We had a jeepney. And they are so cheap. The jeepneys are so cheap. The only thing that makes me reluctant to do that is, will I be allowed to drive this in Makati or BGC? Because I understand that jeepneys, I think jeepneys or tricycles are not allowed to drive in there because they're trying to maintain a high degree of class in those two areas. So I don't know if I will buy an owner type Jeep, or if I will buy a car, or if I will even buy a car, because it depends on how much time I'll spend in the Philippines. Because if I'm going to, but definitely one thing probably I wouldn't do is to buy a brand new car, because my time limit in the Philippines is so limited, not only because of my age, but because of my plan to spend time in the United States as well as the Philippines as well. So I have to pay for insurance and such, so it may not be practical. But the only reason I'm still thinking about wanting to own a car in the Philippines is, what in case of emergency, I get sick or whatnot. What are you going to do? How are you going to bring, let's say, me or my wife to the hospital? Are you going to rely on Uber, or I think in the Philippines they call it Grab? I don't know. And that's the only reason why I was thinking maybe it's a good idea to have a car, at least for security purposes anyway. And also, sometimes it's difficult, especially when you're old, to go from the mall to your condo when it gets late or during paydays. I have seen during my visit in the Philippines, I have seen the amount of traffic and how much we waited for about 1 hour just to be able to get a taxi. And also, if I call Grab and you're going from this place to this place and it's not too far, they will not come. They want somebody who's coming from here and going over here, but not to here. So those are the drawbacks of relying on Grab. But for the most part, 80% of the time we were satisfied. We haven't done it on emergency, and I hope we will never need an emergency. But those are some of the issues that you will have to decide on. It's going to be a personal choice. Now, later, I'm thinking of doing a more comprehensive review of what are the requirements. How about your personal belongings, your furnitures, and things like that? What it would take to send those to the Philippines, and is it even practical to do that? Okay, so please do share this video with other people you know who might be planning to do this thing. And thank you so much for watching this video. I'll appreciate it if you click like and if you subscribe to my channel, unless you have already done so. Thank you, make it a great day, and God bless.